It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show. Buongiorno tutti. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. It is my most favoritist time of the day to record, bright and early in the morning. The voice is just a little extra special today, so I'm very happy about that. We have a lot of stuff in the show, and of course, you probably should be paying at least double what you're paying now for this show. So keep that in mind. Remember the bargain that you're getting. Of course, you can leave a 5-star review somewhere or share the show. A little mini thingy coming up about my adventures on YouTube. I'm just going to leave that for you hanging. It'll be in a few minutes, so it's not a big deal. I have a segment on how to balance investments between work accounts and not work accounts. Keeping in mind, overall portfolio is what you're going for in your plan. Investments in specific accounts don't need to match. And you can go into incredible detail about, should I have bonds in a taxable account and high growth things in a non-taxable account, or vice versa? You know, you can probably calculate which one is better, but I think the difference is going to be very small, and you can probably spend that time doing something more productive. Also, later today, a nice long interview with Ray Smock. He is a fan favorite, a interviewer, that's me, by the way, favorite, and a long history in politics, a long history in history. And he knows a lot of things, and we talk about a whole bunch of topics, including one of our favorites, of course, Donald John Trump, and how we got to where we are, what may happen next. Fingers crossed we get a good path going forward. But again, that's a nice long interview, so I'm going to keep the intro comments here really short, and we're just going to take a little comic break or a quote or some music or something, and we'll get into the good stuff, so don't go anywhere. I have a very short little segment here on EVs. I know, I've talked about it before. I was on YouTube, and I thought to myself, hey, I wonder what actual anti-EV people are doing. Are there people? What are they doing? Are they making videos? Do they know how to make a video? I mean, because so I put in a few keywords, and I watched a couple of videos, and wow. I mean, you know, these people have tinfoil hats, and it's the Illuminati and aliens and flat Earth all rolled together. The things that these people are claiming, do I have to assume that it's a joke, right? It's a joke. There's no way a person could function in our modern society and have the ability to turn on a computer and a video camera at the same time and record a video saying the things that they are saying with a straight face for it to not be a joke, right? I mean, as an example, one guy said, well, the most power any business could ever get from an electric company is 1 megawatt of power, because that's the standard. That's what you get for a business. So if you have 10 350 kilowatt stations, then that means they have to split the power 10 ways, and therefore everyone's being lied to, and there's no way you could actually charge 10 cars at 350 because the most they would get would be 100, and that's if they only have 10 chargers. And there was a guy who had a business who wanted to put in a charger, and the electric company said, you don't even have enough power at all to put in a charging station. And then there was another business where they couldn't run everything in their business if someone wanted to charge their car because they had to share the electricity. Really? He thinks that's how electricity works? That there's a limit? I mean, what do giant fabricating facilities do? What do companies do that use massive amounts of electricity to melt steel and weld things? It just blows my mind that he thinks there's some random small limit that a business can't exceed. And I thought about that, and the only thing I can think I can add is this comment that you may recognize.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
There are people who believe that dinosaurs and men lived together, that they roamed the earth at the same time. There are museums that children go to in which they build dioramas to show them this. And what this is, purely and simply, is a clinical psychotic reaction. They are crazy. They are stone cold fuck nuts. I can't be kind about this because these people are watching the Flintstones as if it were a documentary. Now, there is a big difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and that is the New Testament God is really kind of a great guy. He is, especially when you compare him to the Old Testament God, who is a prick. I don't know what happened to God, over time, how he matured, if he went to an anger management class. Or maybe just the birth of a son calmed him down. But before he had the kid, holy fuck, he was out of control.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. This segment is from the mailbag, and it is about how to balance your investments between something like your 401k or other work program, pension, retirement plan, assuming you have some flexibility in there, and other things that aren't inside of your 401k or 403b. The first thing I have to do to get out of the way, of course, it's always the case that none of this is specific, personalized investment advice, but I have to additionally point out, due to regulations and rules from the Department of Labor in relationship to employer-sponsored retirement plans, I am not able to give specific opinions on whether you should keep your 401k, take your money out of your 401k, or what you should do within your 401k. Sorry, I had longer segments on that in the past. You can check for those or email me if that didn't make any sense to you whatsoever. And of course, my email is phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, which is where I got this delightful email from a listener. I'll just use the initials RS. And basically the question was, hey, Phil, I love the granularity of your plan, and I now have enough money to do so. But the big problem, I'm still paraphrasing here, the big problem I have with my work plan is outside of the total stock market index or the S&P 500, there's a lot of shitty funds that have really high expense ratios, and I don't want to use those. How do you deal with this with your clients, or what should I do? Great question. So following up on that little comment about the Department of Labor, if someone is a client of mine, or even if they're not a client of mine, I can no longer, at least by my choice, based on my understanding of the rules, give any personalized investment advice. However, as the advisor, the client can, and maybe one could even argue they should, send me the information about what choices they have made within their 401k or similar plan. While I can't review their plan and make recommendations or changes to what they do, because that would be giving free advice, which would mean they could never move that money over to me for pay. Again, Department of Labor rules. I can take that information and add it to the giant spreadsheet that I create, and I can track what they are doing. I can't make recommendations on what they should do, but it's probably a good idea for them to let me know what they're doing, and I can put that in the spreadsheet. So, a theoretical example. Someone has $1 million total portfolio. They have $300,000 in their 401k, and they have $700,000 in other places. And we're assuming also this is a person who is not really close to retirement. So we're going to eliminate bonds and the cushion from this discussion for the sake of simplicity. And inside of their 401k, they have decided on their own, independently, without any consultation from me, that the really one and only investment that is any good is the Vanguard or Fidelity or Schwab or T. Rowe Price or something like that S&P 500 index fund. Now, they might like that fund because it's the S&P 500. They might like it because it's the only index. It's the lowest expense ratio. And they're saying, that's where I'm going to go with all of the options I have. And again, there might be 2 or 3 or 5 good choices. But again, I'm trying to make this overly simplified for the purposes of this segment. So in this theoretical case, $300,000, they only have one good choice in their opinion, and it's the S&P 500. So they have the $300,000 of their 401k money all in that one position. Cool. Now, if I look at the money they have, perhaps if this person were to be a client, and they have another $700,000 in an IRA that I manage, I could look at that and say, okay, because we're creating this fictitious person, they don't need any cushion or bonds at this time. Excellent. So we have $100,000 available for stock investing. And I might think to myself, hey, following my own rules, my own guidance, 30 to 35% should be international. Let's call it 30 for the sake of this discussion. That's 300,000 out of the 1 million, 700,000 in the IRA, 300,000 in the 401k. So I say, okay, let's put $300,000 from the IRA into the blend of international index funds that I like to use. This is covered in other segments. You can Google for those segments, those topics in older shows. So that's 300,000 into international. That leaves 700,000 in total. Because the trick here is to look at everything holistically. I think that's the right word. Everything in the summary level. It doesn't matter if all of your accounts match and have the same investments. Often that's not practical for a lot of different reasons. And in this case, it's particularly not practical because 300,000 is in the S&P 500 in your 401k. So let's go back to the IRA. where we have 700,000. 300,000 goes into international. So 30% of all of your money, all of your stock index money is in international. Now we have 700,000 to go into U.S. domestic stocks. If half of that money should be large cap, that's where my mind is at right now. That may or may not be the right thing for you, but let's say that it is. That would be 350,000. Well, you already have 300,000 in large cap value and growth via the S&P 500 index fund. So if half of your 700,000 should be large cap, 350,000, and 300,000 already is, what I might do, or what you could do, is then in your IRA, put $25,000 more in the large cap growth fund and $25,000 more in the large cap value fund. I currently think that those should be equal in size. And the S&P 500 is pretty much those two funds, large cap growth and large cap value. 300,000 is in your 401k in that position, and you add 25,000 to large cap growth and large cap value inside of your IRA. So now you have 300,000 in international, you have 50,000 in large cap domestic, and now in your IRA you have 350,000. That I then would break up in 4 equal parts to do mid cap growth and value and also small cap growth and value. And now, when you look at everything all combined in your total portfolio, you are in the allocation that I think might be the best way to go forward. And as I've talked about many times in the past, you can create a different plan for yourself than the plan or the ideas that I have. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it does, but the goal is to have a plan and to follow that plan. That's much more important than a lot of other things because you want to take emotion out of this. You definitely don't want to be in the position where you're buying something and go, oh, should I keep it because it's up, or should I sell it because it's up, or should I sell it or keep it because it's down? And once you have that emotional game going on, you're probably going to lose more often than you're going to win. This way, you have a plan. You have no bonds or cushion because you're not near retirement. 30% you put in international and a handful of funds over there. Again, described in other segments. U.S. domestic, half in large cap growth and value. You've got most of that covered with your work plan. Cool. So you can have one fund in your work plan, but yet in your IRA still have all of the granularity and clarity of what you want to own. And if you add more money to your IRA, or if it grows, or you get dividends, you can rebalance there and let your company keep rolling with the S&P 500. You do have the possible problem that if you keep your job for many years, the S&P 500 can become too big. And if it's disproportionately large, you might want to consider other choices, or you just accept that you're out of balance a little bit and you're overweighted in large cap. But, maybe you also open an account that's a taxable account and you add $10,000 or $20,000 there, assuming you have that ability, and you could invest that into some small cap or international things. But just some ways to think about what to do with your 401k or 403b or related kind of work employer sponsored program, and how to look at that and consider that as part of your overall portfolio. Hopefully that helps. We'll be right back.
What if you're wrong?
Well, what if I'm wrong? I mean, anybody could be wrong. We could all be wrong about the flying spaghetti monster and the pink unicorn and the flying teapot. You happen to have been brought up, I would presume, in the Christian faith. You know what it's like not to believe in a particular faith because you're not a Muslim, you're not a Hindu. Why aren't you a Hindu? Because you happen to have been brought up in America, not in India. If you'd been brought up in India, you'd be a Hindu. If you were brought up in Denmark in the time of the Vikings, you'd be believing in Wotan and Thor. If you were brought up in classical Greece, you'd be believing in Zeus. If you were brought up in Central Africa, you'd be believing in the great Juju up the mountain. There's no particular reason to pick on the Judeo-Christian God in which, by the sheerest accident, you happen to have been brought up, and ask me the question, what if I'm wrong? What if you're wrong about the great juju at the bottom of the sea?
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
All right, everybody. Today's guest, a regular, if I have any kind of regular on the show, it is Ray Smock. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, Phil.
I am delighted. I was inspired to contact you because you're in a new movie, well, documentary film. But before we get to that, give us a quick reminder of some of your background and experience and how you know some of the things that we're going to talk about.
Well, I've had a long and checkered career, but I was a documentary editor, worked for many years on the papers of the African-American leader Booker T. Washington, and wrote a biography of Booker T. Washington. And then my next career was as the historian of the U.S. House of Representatives. And I did that for 10 years, and then 10 years as a freelance writer and researcher, and then the last 20 years at the Robert C. Byrd Center for Congressional History and Education at Shepherd University, which is in West Virginia, about 75 miles from Washington, D.C. And I just retired from that position.
Nice.
So if this sounds like a long career, it's because I'm in my 80s.
Excellent. Yeah, you mentioned the biography of Booker T. Washington, and this is not a 200-page book, is it?
Well, yeah, it's just a little over 200 pages. I don't know how many pages it has, maybe 250, 260, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Published in 2009 by Ivan D., a nice independent publisher out of Chicago, and I was glad to do it.
Excellent. And is this the reason you were on that new documentary, or is that for something else?
Yeah, the new documentary is called the Niagara Movement, and it's a Florentine Films documentary. Larry Hott is the producer. He's been working with Ken Burns for many years, but he's an independent producer within the Florentine film family. And he interviewed me for this about a year ago, and the film is out now and will appear next week on February 12th on PBS stations across the country. But I'm showing it earlier this week at the Robert Byrd Center, and it deals with the early efforts. The Niagara Movement only lasted about 5 years, from 1905 to 1909. But this is where the first 20th century protests, let's protest for civil rights. And that movement, led by W.B. Du Bois and a guy named William Monroe Trotter, who was a fiery black newspaper editor in Boston, Massachusetts. And they call it the Niagara Movement because their first meeting was at Niagara Falls.
Fair enough. And you said this is the beginning of the civil rights movement?
It is the beginning of the civil rights movement in the 20th century. Of course, you could argue that civil rights was what the abolitionist movement to get rid of slavery was all about.
Absolutely. And of course, our good friend Nikki Haley has recently said that the United States is not a racist country and never has been. Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's the dumbest thing she ever said.
Yeah, one of them.
And there's no mincing any words about that. Of course, slavery is one of the central issues of American history from its very beginning, and also the quest for civil rights has gone on since the beginning. But in the 20th century, there was a big change because in the late 19th century, the idea was to accommodate these terrible Jim Crow laws after slavery, that basically almost re-enslaved African Americans, and the leader of that at that time was Booker T. Washington, and he gave a speech in Atlanta, Georgia, in 1895 that said, we shouldn't agitate for our civil rights. We should just get good jobs, become successful citizens, develop careers, and of course in those days careers meant trades.
Right.
And that once we were educated, once we had a good job, that civil rights would come. And
wow.
But some of the northern black intellectuals said, no, we can't wait. We can't accommodate. We need to agitate for our rights right now. So that's the big change, and that's what the Niagara Movement film is about.
Well, that sounds like a very naive and beautiful dream, 100 plus years ago, that would be the way it would work, that racists would just go peacefully into that quiet night. And they'd gotten quieter over in the last decades until recently. And I know he's one of your most favoritist people in all of American history, Donald John Trump, as you like to call him, because I think that's his name. What's going on with this guy, and is he going to be elected president? What do you think?
Well, I have no idea, and of course I'm scared, like any sensible American should be, of seeing him back in the White House again. It's a long way between now and the election, and I think there's a lot of panic going on now. Because it does look like he's going to be the nominee. The Republican Party has had an opportunity to scuttle him, but he has too big a hold on the party, and they're all afraid of him, and they're afraid of what he might do. And so the party is beholden to him in all kinds of unholy ways. And I can't believe that the Republican Party, which is one of our great political parties, and not that I always agree with them, but they produced some sane leaders. They're not producing sane leaders anymore.
Yeah, it seems like a total and absolute capitulation to the insanity, and I'd love to hear if your thoughts are different than mine. While Trump is clearly a problem, even if he goes away, the problem doesn't get fixed necessarily, because it's the people that were willing to just give up on reason and humanity and just back a strong man. They're still going to be around.
Yes, they will. And that's not very troublesome too. We have a tremendous number of people in all kinds of state governments who are, coming up with all kinds of crazy laws right now that most of them will be declared unconstitutional, but that doesn't mean they won't try. And the banning of books and the banning of anything that has to do with gay rights and all this stuff that's going on in Florida and other states at the state level. And then when you get to the federal level, and you have some of these hotheads, especially in the House of Representatives, the so-called Freedom Caucus people, who are basically nihilists. They don't believe in government.
Yeah.
And what they do believe in is their own seeing their own self in office and out making noise that has nothing to do with legislating. This has been one of the least productive Congresses in the history of the country.
And in a way that's a
you wouldn't know it listening to them.
In a way, that's a good thing, right? Because if they actually had their shit together, it'd really be dangerous.
Yeah, that's true. In other words, they claim in the House that, we've been passing appropriations bills. Yeah, they've been passing them, but they were dead on arrival in the Senate because they had ridiculous things in them. So they're not serious legislators. They don't know how to compromise. And whether we like it or not, compromise is the art of politics. Nobody ever gets everything they want. But these hotheads expect the world to come around to them, and they won't compromise on anything. And now they're even saying, that they won't support any border legislation, which has been proposed and which has bipartisan support in the Senate. And because Donald Trump told them, no, don't settle this border issue now. Don't put a lot of money down there. Don't put new judges down there and a lot more border agents. Don't put them down there now because I want this to be a campaign issue. So, and they capitulated on that. And even Mitch McConnell in the Senate. I mean, they simply will not pass legislation that gets bipartisan support in some places.
And this is the driving force for that, Donald Trump, and of course his election, is that they don't want anything productive or successful to come out in the next year because somehow Biden might get credit for it, right? That's what we're talking about, right?
That's exactly what we're talking about. And that's what this stalemate is. And that's why there's no legislation being passed. And in the meantime, the Biden administration is moving ahead as best it can with previous bills, some of which are now just beginning to be felt. Some of the economic development ideas are filtering into the economy. I don't know. We see the stock market at the highest point it's ever been. That scares some of us, because what goes up must come down.
Not necessarily, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, you're the expert there.
Well,
not necessarily.
I know some things. I do know that we have a couple hundred years of continuous record highs. So new record highs is par for the course. The question, of course, is, are we getting ahead of ourselves? Are they too high, too fast? But not necessarily the subject for today. But we aren't voting on aid for Ukraine, aid for Israel, and that maybe is a little more contentious. I think the Ukraine, to me, is straight up no-brainer. Anything we can provide, dollars, support, weapons to fight Russia at this point in time is a no-brainer. Am I missing something? You have a different thought on that?
Oh, absolutely not. It is essential to everything that has happened since World War II to contain Russia and NATO and all the other things that have, and the various alliances that have come into play to contain the Russian expansionism. And Putin has claimed even newer levels of Russian expansionism, taking it back to the ancient empire and thinking that basically he should have all of Europe. So we're dealing with another kind of insane personality in leading the Soviet Union, but he has the grip on that country that like few have had, and he's a danger. And the Ukraine war is a perfect example of that. It's now sort of morphed into an old-fashioned trench warfare like World War I.
Yeah.
And it's pathetic that we haven't done more for Ukraine, or that we haven't figured out a way to get them jets for air cover as fast as they need them. And of course, now everything held up because conservative Republicans simply want to make that a campaign issue, and they don't want to see it solved in the next year.
And what would you think are the odds of Ukraine getting more support from us if Trump is elected?
Well, I mean, he's basically a Putin clone. I mean, he loves Vladimir Putin. So I don't see where he would side with Ukraine at all. And he would probably say, well, those are Russians. They were once Russian territory. It should be Russian territory again.
Yeah, and of course he could even rely on something that's more, more accepted in America. That's not our country. Let's just spend our money at home, and we're not going to be the policemen of the world. And when people say things like that, I think they're maybe a tad naive, that we can just curl up into a little ball and let everything else burn down around us and we're going to be okay.
Well, we've always had an element in this country of America first.
Yeah.
And the idea that the United States can survive on its own and not even think about what's going on in the rest of the world. Well, that is a totally naive position. We live in a global economy. We live in a global world of communications. We have countries and we have boundaries, but we cannot pretend that we are part of a larger world, larger complex world that we have to constantly interact with and protect ourselves from time to time.
Absolutely. So what else is going on or that you have in your mind that you want to go over now?
Well, I'm spending a great deal of time thinking about national politics, thinking about this campaign. As you know, earlier on, Phil, I wrote 3 self-published books on critical essays on Donald Trump.
Right.
And I continue to write on Facebook and occasionally in local newspapers op-ed pieces related to Trump. And I'll continue to do that. I don't know if I'll publish another book. I never tried to get a regular publisher because I wanted this to be my raw opinions. And it's easy to publish with Amazon. And, some might call it vanity press, but it's just another outlet for me, and I like it.
Yeah.
But the other thing, of course, is working in ways to get people registered to vote. I think it's going to be so important that we do that this year.
Well, and I'm in one of those swing states now in Florida, and there's large sections of people that promote and love and support Trump, vote for Trump, and I can't wrap my head around it because it seems so clearly obvious that that's going to be a disaster unfolding in front of us if that happens.
Yes, and the only thing that as I mentioned earlier, I think it's the panic that we're all feeling in various levels is a little early. I think that the campaign is now just beginning to take shape. Now, of course, Donald Trump, a demagogue, constantly campaigns. That's what he does. He keeps his base constantly excited about what he's doing. He never stopped campaigning.
Nope.
In his since 2016, he campaigned in the White House. He violated the Hatch Act by actually holding campaign events in the White House, on the White House lawn. You don't do that. When you campaign for president, you don't use your office. But he did, and of course he's constantly campaigning. Has been since he left office, campaigning on the idea that the last election was rigged and he still should be president. So he only knows one thing, and that's campaigning. So he's had this whole market largely to himself until this month. And now the Democratic Party and its machinery are gearing up, and Joe Biden is gearing up, and you will see a lot more of a narrative, an alternative narrative to the kind of stuff that Donald Trump has been spouting. And of course, his legal troubles are going to continue to hound him. He's coming unglued. I mean, he can't control himself. He can't even sit in the courtroom without storming out. I don't know who he's trying to impress, but I think it's because he's neurotic and he can't control his own emotions. He can only sit there so long, and he has to bolt out of the place. There's hardened criminals who behave better in court than Donald Trump can.
Absolutely.
And so this what's going to happen is the new narrative is going to start eating on him. These cases are going to continue to eat on him, and I don't know if he can keep from being unraveled completely on his own before we get to November.
Well, boy, I'd love to see him pop, but I just. And you did mention, and I just pulled up on Amazon some of your books, Bearing Witness to America's Worst Presidents, Essays on the Trump Disaster, American Demagogue, Critical Essays on the Trump Presidency, and Trump Tsunami, a historian's diary of the Trump campaign in his first years in office. And as you said, you're on Facebook. Is that something that anyone can come and follow you? Do you have a page? Is that cool if we encourage people to go there?
I don't really. I've got a few thousand Facebook friends, but I've never tried to turn it into something larger.
Okay.
I may try to do something more with YouTube, with podcasts this year. Now that I'm retired, I got time to figure out.
Maybe you can make some cute TikTok videos.
I'm not sure I'm ready for TikTok. I can't dance fast enough, but I can talk fast enough, I think.
Yeah.
So the campaign is keeping me interested. I also I'm a photographer, have been forever. So I'm going to continue to do photography. Nature photography keeps me sane. When I get too high on politics, I just go for a walk in the woods, shoot pictures of hawks and ducks and birds and scenery, and that's my balance. That's my balance with nature. I've been doing photography since I was 11 years old. I had my own audiovisual company earlier in my career. I published a book of the photographs of an early woman photographer, a turn of the century, 1880s to about 1920, and so I've always been interested in that, and it's been my anchor in so many ways. People have various outlets. Some of them do sports. They run every day.
Yeah.
Mine's photography.
Well, I can definitely encourage the listeners, whether you're watching Fox or MSNBC, please limit yourself. It can get in your brain and rattle around. If you skip a day or two, it's going to be okay, because Trump's still just as bad as he was last week. So you don't have to sit and watch that 24/7. Do something else with your time. Do something, find a local charity or political organization, or like you said, take photos, go out in the woods, swim in your pool, whatever it is you can do. Don't just sit on the couch all day. It will eat you alive, literally. Of course, now I'm going to go opposite 180. You talked about Trump campaigning from office. Of course, he destroyed the emoluments clause, which was so, it was so simple, so straightforward, where he can't take gifts as a political official. And I had the luxury, the wonderful opportunity several years ago to visit with you and go to the Bird Center and see all of the stuff that was given to him that he could not take because it would be a violation of the emoluments clause. So it was donated, to this museum in his honor. And of course, now we have, not now, but January 6th. Do you have any specific thoughts on that? I'd like to talk about that for a minute, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. January 6th was the darkest day in our history in so many ways. And as someone who, I still get goosebumps when I go see the Capitol. And all the time that I worked on the Hill, I worked for 3 different speakers of the House in the 11 years or so that I was on the Hill. I would just seeing that the Capitol in all of its glory every day was an amazing feeling. And to see it desecrated, maybe desecrated is too strong a term, because that usually means, when desecration means religious relics. And I don't see the Capitol as a religious object. I see it as an object of democracy, and an object of the American Republic, and probably the greatest symbol of democracy in the world, and as others see it, that Capitol Dome. And to see American citizens in paramilitary clothing and with all kinds of crazy half-baked weapons, climbing all over the place and violating the space was unbelievably tragic and traumatic for, I think, most Americans. We can't believe it happened. And Donald Trump is saying, if he is elected, all these people, more than 1,000 of them, who have been found guilty of various serious crimes of insurrection and are serving, jail sentences from 5 to 20 years. And he wants to free them all. He calls them hostages.
Yeah.
So you can see what he's appealing to. He's appealing to the people that he thinks there's enough of them out there in America to elect him president again.
Well,
I think there's enough of them out there to cause chaos as we get into the election. I am worried about the number of folks like this who could create chaos at polling places, who could go around like lots of terrorists do on the back of a pickup truck with a couple of AR-15s and create havoc here and there. And that's what that January 6th revealed, that there's no depth to the violence that Trump can elicit.
Right. To change subjects again, because we got a lot to cover. You know who Gavin Newsom is?
Yes, I do. The governor of California.
Yeah. And of course, 30, 40, 50 million, however, 25% of our country lives in California. Very populous state, very influential, economically strong state. And it looks like he has been, I don't know how else to say it, unleashed finally. You were talking about the political machine getting up and rolling, and he has been on some shows talking about Biden and his strengths and how incredibly awful Trump is, and that maybe can allow Biden to keep his hands a little clean and look like the nice guy. But Gavin Newsom has come out swinging, and I'm just like jumping out of my seat, screaming and yelling in joy that someone is finally out there talking about it. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on him or if you've seen him do any of his talks.
Yes, I have, and I'm very impressed with him. I see him as a future presidential candidate.
Yeah, I was just going to say that myself. Yeah,
and as the next generation of leadership within the Democratic Party, he's right up there at the top of the list. As you point out, I mean, the most populous state, one of the world's largest economies.
Yep.
And of course, with all the wonderful things that, and of course, California has more electoral votes than any single state. It's not enough to keep somebody like Donald Trump from being elected. In the last election, an awful lot of those extra votes that Joe Biden got in the popular vote came from California. So it is the future, though, of the Democratic Party. And Gavin Newsom, it looks like he is going to be, as you put it, unleashed. That he will be a sharp spokesman. He's going to take the gloves off and deal with Donald Trump in the terms that he needs to be. He's not a normal politician. There's no equivalency. This is one of the things that the media has had a trouble with Donald Trump. Some of them try to be there was a fair and balanced doctrine, the fairness doctrine that the Supreme Court declared unconstitutional at some point, but it expired anyhow. And to try to be fair and balanced in dealing with someone who is unfair and unbalanced is a real challenge.
Right.
And I think that Gavin Newsom and some of these folks will find ways to just cut right through that and talk about Donald Trump as the flawed character that he is and as the dangerous character he is.
Yeah, I think the fairness doctrine and this American ideal of presenting both sides creates a lot of problems for us, from evolution and creationism to global warming. The news media wants to have 50-50, this person and that person hashing it out, and they're just going to be in the middle reporting the story. But they often seem to forget that they're supposed to check and research and at some point not have on people who commit fraud and who lie time and time again and just not give them airtime. But, here we are. And of course, I want to be respectful of your time, and we've been having so much fun. Is there anything else that you want to cover before we wrap up?
Well, I know that you have been talking a great deal about electric vehicles, now that you are
indeed
the owner of one, and I enjoy hearing some of the debates that you and some of your colleagues have been having about the advantages or disadvantages of electric. And I know you've got folks that think you're nuts for going out there with electric cars. It is the future. There's no question about that. I was just thinking of the early history of electric cars. The electric cars were out there first.
Yeah.
And most people probably don't remember this. It was kind of it was basically a parlor trick. But there was a guy who in the 1830s,
wow,
who took a galvanic battery and put it on a carriage and got it to move without a horse being attached to it. It was mostly a parlor trick. Of course, that battery that he was using could not be recharged. Rechargeable batteries did not even come along for another 50 years. And even then, they were ridiculously complex. And some of those early electric cars had batteries that weighed, 1,600 pounds, for God's sakes. And then had to be recharged after 50 miles.
Yeah.
So they weren't practical, but the idea that there was so much interesting experimentation in using electricity for transportation that and we forget that. And I think that the iteration that's coming back now is the next level of complex technology, which is still evolving, still improving. And but it is the future, and there's no question about that.
I was talking to someone, and I'll just say someone. They made the mention that there's a lot of Americans who simply cannot afford to go out and buy a $40,000 electric car. And I said, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Can those people afford to go out and buy a $40,000 gasoline car? And they said, no. And I said, so what exactly is your point? I mean, a brand new car is not in the cards for a lot of people. And not too long ago, it was not in the cards for me either. Things have turned out pretty well, and I've worked sometimes 3 jobs for decades on end. But, there's a lot of people that can't throw down money for a brand new car. So I was just befuddled by a point that was irrelevant. And the other one that drives me nuts is they talk about the cobalt that is used in a lot of batteries and the legitimate problems with mining it. But then I found out that the single largest use of cobalt in the world is as a catalyst to remove sulfur from oil during the refining process to make gasoline. And so anyone that has problems, but they don't, average person doesn't know any of this stuff. They're just sharing this propaganda, this anti-electric car propaganda, without realizing that almost anything they can ever say that's bad about an electric car is probably worse in a gasoline vehicle. But, here's where we are. I don't know. That's one of those fair and balanced things. Why isn't the media jumping all over that? But I'm not in charge.
Yeah, well, I look at these technological changes as a historian, and I look back at the early history of the automobile and the fact that it was a rich man's toy, and auto racing was replaced horse racing for a lot of rich people, and then it evolves. It becomes more economical. It spreads into larger numbers of people, and then the technology has to increase. Just in my lifetime, the interstate system of highways.
Right.
That's all something that's happened in my lifetime, and the technology now of having more charging stations and having charging devices now that are revolutionary in themselves, that they can charge so much faster. All that technology is going to continue to evolve, and so I don't know if it's going to be fast enough to be of significant difference to global warming, which is another one of those big issues that I try to follow and I try to put in a historical perspective. And yet I know we talk about the industrial age, and we can go back and say that most of the carbon in the atmosphere has increased since the industrial age. But the truth of the matter is, it's even worse than that. You remember old Al Gore in the 1980s when he did this thing called an inconvenient truth.
Right.
And he had this wonderful slideshow, and it talked about carbon rising. That's actually about when the real takeoff begins. It's only in the last 40 years that this is going exponentially worse. So that is a scary proposition, because some of the plans that we have to reduce these things are going to take 25, 30, or 40 years. It's hard to see us getting a good control over this.
Absolutely.
Before things get much worse.
It was actually one of the factors in deciding where to buy a house in Florida. I'm specifically chose a house that's 130 feet above sea level. So as things get worse, I'm 90 miles inland and 130 feet above sea level. So it probably won't be that bad in my lifetime. But there's going to be places where it's bad. And of course, we could talk about this all day. What is the best way for people to keep up with you, follow you? What do you want? Do you want them to email you? Do you want them to follow you on Facebook? Do you just want them to buy the books? Talk to me.
No. I'm not interested in book sales. They've been minuscule anyhow. I mean, I had expenses when I did them, and I recovered my expenses, and I get a small royalty check now and then from Amazon. It's so small that I can't even, I don't even bother with it. It's just so tiny. But I do. If anybody does want to buy one of those on Amazon or get it in a Kindle edition, the best one is the last one, Bearing Witness, and I think that's my best one. I finally got a handle on it. I think it's better written. It's better edited, and it also contains some of the essays that were in my earlier books as an appendix. So that's the one book to get if you did want to look at some of my ramblings, historical. I try to put Trump in historical perspective. I try to deal with him in constitutional ways. I think the thing that you brought up about Trump's emolument clause is the hardest thing for people to grasp, because even the word emoluments does not roll off the tongue.
Yeah,
it's a technical term that means it means a salary. It means a gift that's worth something. It is, and the Constitution says the President of the United States can only take his salary, and if he's going to take anything else, he has to get congressional approval. Right. And under certain circumstances, and here you have Donald Trump, who bragged about this, the fact that he. Reports are that he personally made $7.8 million in addition to his regular salary, which he claims he gave back to the Treasury. He's making $7.8 million. That's the money we can see in violation, and that's coming from foreign governments. Yeah. And he said Trump's argument for that is, I earned every bit of that $7.8 million. No, he didn't. He violated the Constitution to the tune of $7.8 million. Well, the funny thing, I think, if he earned the $7.8 million, is that not admission of crime? What was it that he did to earn it? Right? Exactly. Yeah. So just the fact that he took the money. Yeah. And the fact that he had Trump Tower and all these people would come and spend money at his hotels. Yeah, from foreign countries, and that he was profiting from that. So that's unheard of. It's unprecedented. That goes back story about how that emoluments clause came to be. In the early days of the Republic, Ben Franklin, who went to Europe as a ambassador to both Great Britain and also to France, and especially France. And King Louis XVI gave him a really beautiful gold inlaid box with rare gems, rubies and diamonds and everything like that, as a gift for his wonderful service to the people of France. And Franklin brought that box back to the United States? And he said, no. His colleague said, you cannot keep that because that's something of value that went beyond what you were there for. And so we go from the founding fathers and Benjamin Franklin accepting an expensive gift, and which was rejected and said, no, that's not proper, to Donald Trump, who takes $7.8 million and says he earned it.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect place to wrap it up. Again, everybody, Ray Smock, thank you. We could talk all day, of course, but thank you for coming on the Phil Ferguson Show and sharing some of your knowledge and history and wisdom. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, Phil, it's always a pleasure to be with you, and I wish you well, and I wish all your viewers well. And anytime that I can be of help, or anytime you want to chat, you know how to get me.
Thank you so much. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. I am so delighted you're still hanging around and listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for being here. Another little follow-up on a recent hot topic for me, EVs. Hopefully you're not bored to death with a little bit of a drop in here with this idea. But a little more information on the Chicago winter debacle. A couple of things that weren't previously discussed that I've learned since then. Apparently there were some control centers, and I'm a little fuzzy on this, so I have to see if I can learn more, where there are computers that Tesla has and every EV charging company would have. But apparently one of the Tesla locations had problems in and of itself, where the coolant that was used to keep the servers cool, I guess that's the word to use, froze. And so it wasn't flowing and the servers got hot, and for several hours things had to be shut down. And that prevented some of the stations in Chicago to not either function or not be able to communicate that they weren't functioning and be reset. The other piece of information that I learned is that virtually all the stations that had trouble were V2 superchargers. This is kind of new lingo to me in anticipation of Tesla stations, superchargers, that is, being open to non-Tesla users. Still looking forward to that. But apparently most of the problems were with version 2 equipment, whereas most equipment is version 3. So maybe some of that equipment needs to be refreshed, some new hardware, some new connectors. Who knows? Because obviously there are places much colder than Chicago on an ongoing basis that people use EVs. But do keep in mind, when it's cold, your range will go down some, just like it does in a gasoline car. You just don't notice it. And your charging times might become a little longer. And of course, one of the things that solves this, and people have done this for decades in extremely cold temperatures with gasoline-powered cars, where they'll have a block heater and plug in the cars overnight. Because if you've lived anywhere where it gets cold, and I know I have had this experience years ago, when you go to start your gasoline car, it doesn't start. So it's not magic that gasoline cars work every time you start them and electrics don't. Extreme climates can mess with equipment, whether it's gasoline powered or electric powered. So let's not read too much into that, shall we? Did have an article that I shared on Facebook. Apparently for 2023, at the end of the year and the beginning of 2024, I saw a lot of articles about falling sales and collapsing demand for electric cars. I think the number was something like 46% in 2023 in the United States of America. the number of EVs sold, pure, just straight electric only cars, went up 46% when compared to 2022. So that's a falling demand. I mean, it's a slowing increase because the previous year was something like 70%. And this is expected to happen when you have a larger and larger share of the market, our sales are electric vehicles, because once you get to 80%, you can't grow by 50% because that'd be 120% of all sales. So the percentage increase is slowing, but the number of cars is still increasing dramatically. A couple of different sites were expecting, predicting, projecting, whatever, guessing that for 2024, that increase may become even smaller as a percentage and it'll only be 36% increase in the sale of electric cars in the United States. And of course, we're still years behind. Also, General Motors, what the fuck are you doing? I mean, really, you had the Bolt, which was the number one selling electric car that wasn't a Tesla, at least in the United States. And you said, it's done. Cool. You killed it. The Bolt and the Bolt EUV, slightly bigger, kind of mini SUV kind of thing. You killed them both. Okay. Because you're coming out with other electric cars. You dabble with the ginormous Hummer, and there's a Cadillac, $100,000 electric cars. You experiment while still being able to, I would hope, make money on these ridiculously ginormous, overpriced vehicles. And then 2023 was going to be the year of the Equinox and the Blazer electric versions. I don't think the Equinox has yet hit showrooms. The Blazer did for a couple of weeks, and they delivered hundreds of them and then issued a stop sale because of problematic software. Let's go with that, where I don't think cars ever shut down while they were driving, but the screen would turn off and turn on or blink, not necessarily the one that has your speed and miles and velocity. Velocity is the same as speed. But the media screen, the second screen more towards the center, is clearly not a fun way to drive a vehicle. And so they're working on that. It's been a month now, and they're still working on that. And the thing that just blows my mind is that I used to have a 2019 Chevrolet Bolt EV, Bolt starting with a B for Bravo, that first came out in 2017, and the software in that worked just fine. So how is it that 7 years later, they fuck it up? I don't know. Is it related to the fact that they tried to build in the software for Google instead of just allowing us to plug in our phones, our Google and or Apple phones? I don't know. But it's a real buzzkill for GM, I'm sure. I'm kind of annoyed about it. But because of that, Ford apparently has jumped into second place. But the company that's going to be second place going forward is Hyundai. And Tesla looks like they still have just about 50% of the EV sales in the United States. Will they be able to retain their crown as number one for 24? I'm most certain that they will. However, their percentage of market share will continue to fall. And as I've said before, Tesla's competition is, they're not going to lose to GM or Ford or Volkswagen or Hyundai. Tesla's problem is that they're going to lose to all those companies combined. Porsche, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, Chrysler apparently is not really in the game. Some Jeep electrics, and Hyundai just came out with their EV9, 7-passenger, really large SUV with, of course, more rave reviews because Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, all the same company, and their car battery platform, from what I can tell, is crushing it. I have an Ioniq 6 myself. Absolutely adore the car. Phenomenal range. And EPA rated on the base model, 361 miles of range. Very fast charging. Of course, you can, if you have a house, if you have access to an outlet, you can slow charge it on a level 2 at home. But the DC fast chargers amazing. So they're going to keep putting out one model or so per year and just continue to ramp up. And how many new models has Tesla put out in the last year or 2 or 5 or 7? Just one, the Tesla truck. I don't know. Maybe you guys know. Is it doing well? Are people liking it? I see negative headlines and I ignore them because I haven't really looked into it yet. But anywho, that's it for now. Thank you for listening. I've got to go pack. And so when you're listening to this, I'm probably going to be on a boat. That's right. I'm going to be on a boat and enjoying our Caribbean, Pirates of the Caribbean? Which way? I don't know. But hopefully even warmer than where I normally am in Central Florida. So stay warm. Spring is coming. And I hope to see you out there on the road sometime soon.
Working Christian style. Christian style. We are disciples of Christ and we aren't afraid to show it. We love Jesus Christ and we want the world to know it. The Great Commission tells us to go into the land, meeting people on the street and offering up a hand. Out here in the world,
buying people coffee.
Out here in the world,
shoveling people's walkways.
out here in the world,
watching kids for date night.
out here in the world,
Gonna make it right.
showing kindness, so important to me, hey, and to you, hey. It shows the world that Jesus loved them and that he died for you and me. And when we share the love of Christ, oh yes, we share the love of Christ, we are free, 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 free. Working Christian style. Christian style. Work, work, work. Working Christian style. Christian style. Work, 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 work. Working Christian style. Hey, there's a lady. Work, 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 work. Working Christian style. Hey, let's help that lady. Work, 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 work. Working Christian style.
Whether setting up tables or greeting at the door, helping out in kids' church, scraping gum up off the floor.
We're helping out at Christmas, making lots of Christmas hampers. We fill them up with turkey bread and lots of babies' Pampers.
We'd love to help a friend in need by offering up a meal. It's all about showing all that God's love is real.
We're helping out a single mom by taking out her son so she can go shopping or get her nails done. Showing kindness, so important to me, hey, and to you, hey. It shows the world that Jesus loved them and that he died for you and me. And when we share the love of Christ, oh yes, we share the love of Christ, we are free, 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 free. Working Christian style. Christian style. Work, work, work. Working Christian style. Christian style. Work, 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 work. Working Christian style. Hey, there's a lady. Work, 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 work. Working Christian style. Hey, let's help that lady. Work, 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 work. Working Christian style.
Showing acts of kindness is who we're meant to be. So now you see evangelism ain't so scary.
Now you see it's easy. Get out and get it done. Share the love of Christ. It's your turn. Pass it on.
Working Christian style. Hey, there's a lady. Work, 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 work. Working Christian style. Hey, It's that same lady. Work, 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 working Christian style. Working Christian style.